Provisions under FEMA for issuance of ESOPs. Purpose of this session, friends, that we have is to empower ourselves with good understanding of various provisions under FEMA which need to be complied with for issuance and valuation of ESOPs locally and globally. For obvious reasons, FEMA provisions are punitive and can have far-reaching consequences in case if any violation is done by the company knowingly or unknowingly. So now in the context of ESOPs, our focus is on the FEMA provisions that need to be complied and also how valuation is to be done as per the FEMA provisions. What are we going to cover now is when does FEMA become applicable? When does valuation become applicable under FEMA? ESOP issuance when FEMA will be applicable. ESOP issuance when FEMA will not be applicable. Legal framework overview under FEMA. Compliance checklist ESOPs to non-resident. Step-by-step procedure for issuance of ESOPs. Rule 8 of NDI 2019, issue of employee stock options for sweat equity shares, and Rule 21(2) of non-debt instruments regulations of rules of 2019, that is pricing guidelines. When does FEMA become applicable? Any transaction when there is an inflow or outflow of any foreign currency, it needs to be looked through the filter of FEMA. Transaction may be exempt, the transaction may be in exempt category, still FEMA becomes applicable. When does valuation become applicable under FEMA? Any transaction of purchase or sale of any security in foreign currency will require valuation. And why will it require valuation? It will require valuation because it has inherent risk of misuse by over transfer of foreign currency outward or under transfer of foreign currency inward. And that is the reason as to whenever there is a transaction of purchase or sale of any security in foreign currency, it will require valuation. Why? Because you are selling shares to a non-resident. And if the valuation is not done, it is possible that you may, when I say you, that means in general, a person may do the transaction, the official price at which the transaction is done can be at a lower price, and the balance amount can be parked outside India. So that is possible. And likewise, when you are purchasing stocks from a non-resident, again the valuation is required. And why the valuation is required? Because it is again possible that for the purpose of buying the security, you might unnecessarily pay an excessive price to the seller of these securities, thereby incur a loss to the exchequer or to the treasury of this country. And that is why a valuation becomes mandatory in these two situations. ESOP issuance when FEMA will be applicable. Number 1, Indian company issuing ESOPs to employees of its overseas parent, subsidiary, joint venture, associate companies, FEMA will be applicable. A foreign company issuing ESOPs to employees of its Indian parent, subsidiary, joint venture, associate company, FEMA will be applicable. Now, besides FEMA being applicable, besides Indian laws, this will be subject to overseas applicable laws also, right? So whenever you are doing any such transaction, not only you will need to take care of the FEMA, but these will also need to be taken care of by the company to whose employees you are issuing the ESOPs. ESOP issuance when FEMA will not be applicable. Number one, overseas parent, subsidiary, joint venture, associate companies of an Indian company issuing ESOPs to their local employees. No worries, not concerned. Indian parent, subsidiary, joint venture, associate companies of an overseas company issuing ESOPs to their local, that is Indian employees, no FEMA application. Indian company to employees of its Indian parent, subsidiary, joint venture, associate companies, apparently there is no foreign currency transaction, so no FEMA applicable. Overseas company to employees of its overseas parent, subsidiary, joint venture, associate companies, also FEMA not applicable. What is the legal framework for overview under FEMA? So the prime legislation is the FEMA 99 and particularly section 6. Applicable rules in the context of ESOPs under FEMA. Number one is the FEMA non-debt instruments rules 2019. Number two, FEMA mode of payment and reporting of non-debt instruments regulation 2019, right? So these FEMA non-debt instruments rules are issued by the Finance Ministry, and the FEMA mode of payment and reporting of non-debt instruments, now this is issued by RBI. So the key governing authorities, when it is in case of debt instruments, it is the RBI, which is the key governing authority. And in case of the non-debt instruments rule, it is the Department of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance, which is the key governing authorities. Compliance checklist ESOPs to non-resident. Number one, check eligibility under Rule 8 of Non-Debt Instrument Rules 2019. Board approval required, shareholders approval required. Check the sectoral cap and the entity root compliance. So sectoral cap, depending on the different sector, there may be caps up to which the FDI may be permitted. So that will need to be seen. Those caps will need to be maintained. And again, depending on the different industry, the entry route can be automatic or it can be subject to the government approval. That will need to be checked. As regards the valuation, what FEMA says that the valuation should not be less than the fair market value. FEMA does not prescribe any valuation method. So that is what we need to remember. What the FEMA says, as per SEBI or internationally accepted pricing methodology. So all the rules and the regulations under FEMA, when it comes to the valuation, they would say number one, that the valuation must be fair market value, and it does not prescribe any method. What it says is that the valuation must be as per SEBI or internationally accepted pricing methodology, which means if you are a chartered accountant, or any other valuation professional, if you are following the valuation standards issued by the IVSC or any other international valuation standard which are accepted globally, if you are using those standards, you can do the valuation. Allotment should be done within 60 days of receipt of the money, and form FCGPR must be filed on firm portal within 30 days and maintain supporting documentation. Okay, this I think we have already covered. This also. Rule 8 of the NDI. Again, Rule 8 allows issuance of ESOPs and sweat equity shares to foreign employees and directors. Covers employees of holding companies, joint ventures, JVs or wholly owned subsidiaries. What it requires is compliance with the Companies Act and SEBI, sectoral caps, and the FCGPR filing. As regards the pricing guideline, so we need to follow Rule 21.2 of the non-debt instruments rules 2019. And what it says is, foreign exchange management non-debt instruments rule to be followed. Price of equity instruments of an Indian company issued to a person resident outside India shall not be less than, as per the SEBI guidelines, as per the international accepted pricing methodology, duly certified by a chartered accountant or a SEBI registered merchant banker or a practicing cost accountant in case of unlisted company. There are certain restrictions. Issue of ESOPs not permitted in prohibited sectors. So real estate में आप हैं अगर तो नहीं कर सकते हैं. टॉपिको कंपनी है तो नहीं कर सकते हैं. ESOP to persons other than employees. So the FEMA, the Companies Act and the SEBI regulations talk of only issuing ESOPs to the employees of the company and the directors of the company. Directors of the company also with a limitation, independent directors not allowed. Directors nominated by the financial institutions subject to the agreement are allowed. So that is what needs to be remembered. So consultants cannot be issued the ESOPs by a company. Prior government approval if issuing is not in permitted sector. So अगर permitted sector में नहीं है, then the approval will need to be obtained from the government for issuing such ESOPs. So friends, with this we come to the close of our discussion, and interestingly it is already 4.02. So before I hand over it to Mohit, let me thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for your very active participation. And I would also like to thank IOB RBF for organizing this session, and also a big thank you to Mohit for coordinating this session. Now, if there are any questions, of course I will be happy to welcome all your questions.